Hello and thank you very much for joining us on UPfront on Joy News TV. So on 12th of March 2020, when Ghana recorded its first case, in fact 2 cases of COVID-19, the plan was to ensure contact tracing and testing in order to find out those who could be affected. By 27th March, when the president announced the lockdown, Ghana had about 53 cases with an additional 78 through mandatory quarantine. Now, ever since we lifted the lockdown, the case count has risen from 1,042 to 2,074. And I'm aware of how some of you were actually unhappy and complained when the lockdown was lifted. So with the cases rising to almost 100%, the question is whether Ghana's strategy is working. We've become the epicenter in West Africa. And so today we start by reviewing our strategy and finding out whether it's time for a review. My name is Winston Amwa, and this is UPfront on Joy News. When I return after the break, I'll be introducing my guest, and then we get into a discussion first by reviewing, looking at how well we've been able to perform when it comes to dealing with a situation and whether or not it's important to actually look at reviewing our strategy. We'll be right back after this break. All right, so welcome back from that short break, and thank you very much for staying with us. This is UPfront, and today our focus is on whether or not it's time to review Ghana's strategy in the fight against COVID-19 or coronavirus. And joining us to have the discussion is Dr. Mrs. Augustina Angelina Silverken, who is a lecturer at the Department of Theoretical and Applied Biology at KNUST and also a research scientist and virologist. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Mrs. Silverken. I believe you're doing very well this evening.
I'm very well, thank you, Winston, and a warm evening to your cherished listeners and your cherished viewers.
Great. So let's look at Ghana's approach towards COVID-19 and fighting of COVID-19. On March 12, when we recorded our first 2 cases, we talked about how we're going to ensure contact tracing and also ensure enhanced testing. That resulted in a lockdown to actually enable us to gather a lot of data to deal with the situation. Now, fast forward that to today, we have 2,074 cases. Let's start by reviewing how well we've performed, or otherwise, our approach towards fighting COVID-19. What will be your assessment of that approach?
Yes, indeed. I'm just looking at the website, the Ghana Health Service, and looking at the confirmed cases, the various regions, and it looks it is quite worrying. Looking at the numbers, but I guess these have always been expected, especially when now we have sort of moved from the imported or the imported cases or the sporadic cases or the cluster of cases, but we are gradually moving towards the very high level of transmission in terms of cases. So this is the community-based transmission of cases. And as soon as this happens, then chances are that you will experience what we are currently experiencing. But of course, we have done quite a number of things, or we did a number of things in the past. So for example, we closed down our borders, and we closed down almost every single border, hopefully, in the country. We embarked on an aggressive testing, and we didn't just test, we tested, we traced, we treated, so we isolated the positive cases, and then we also treated them. Importantly was the fact that, look, even for those who had just gotten into the country, they weren't just tested and allowed to go home, but then they were tested and then they were kept somewhere until the duration of the incubation period of the virus, which I think we did so very well. And amazingly, at the end of the 14-day period, I think 26 or 27 of them tested positive. And of course, like I said, we have done a lot of testing, and I guess the two leading labs have definitely done a yeoman's job. So we've done all the testing. I think in Africa, maybe apart from South Africa, we may be the second leading, or I don't even know whether we have taken over.
Well, we're taking over now, but you talked about the fact that the numbers are worrying, and I'd want to know, why do you say the numbers are worrying? And also you talk about how the numbers should be expected. So in one breath, it's worrying, and another, it should be expected. How could something that is worrying be expected?
So worrying in the sense that, look at Greater Accra, for example, and gradually look at Eastern region. I mean, I think Eastern region, it was initially about the camps, 3 or so camps where one person tested positive, and then gradually 37. Now we don't even know whether these numbers are coming from the same camp or the same camps, or they are coming from communities. Central region, I honestly don't know the story behind these numbers, the 21. I mean, Upper East, we know about this young boy who died, and the family members didn't even want to accept the fact that the young guy died of COVID. And so we may even at the end of the day want to go into the details of every single one of these numbers, the numbers we are seeing as projected. And it is expected because, look, once you have one case in the country or some cases in the country, once you test, you will find positives. The amazing thing is for us and for Noguchi and the other testing sites, so the strategy is once you test, you will find. And I say these numbers are worrying because now it means that almost maybe a time will come whereby almost every person you meet, chances are that that person may end up testing positive once you test the person. So we may want to restructure, redesign, re-strategize some of the things we have put in place to enable us slow down the transmission of this virus. I mean, between yesterday and today, we have seen like a jump, and this is where my worry also comes in. But of course, we also need to remember that these numbers may also be coming from the backlog of samples we are still testing. The interesting thing is we have backlogs and we keep on getting samples. Of course, once you get the samples, you've got to give priority or priorities to some of the samples, especially for those coming from the hospital. So again, it will be important for us to know which of these, the confirmed cases, which ones are coming from the hospitals vis-a-vis those coming from the communities.
So let's look at the backlog. You've talked about the fact that some of these cases are also, from the backlog. And so we know, for you who works within the sector, how long does it take you to, test and have results come out?
So it depends on a whole number of things. So for example, the starting material or your starting specimen. So for example, if you receive sputum, then it is mucoid. So you need to spend a bit of time working on it to remove that mucoid nature of it. But if you receive something like a nasopharyngeal swab, or an oropharyngeal swab, or even a nasal wash, then you don't need to, or you may not spend a lot of time on it in processing it. So all these things need to be factored into the testing processes before you can say that, yes, indeed, for this particular one, you spend less time, or for this particular sample, you spend more time. But then on the average, between 4 to 6 hours, you should get your result. Again, it depends on the number of samples you have received at a time.
So talking about the number of
100 samples.
Dr. Silverkin, so talking about the number of samples. Now, we know that you're pooling. And so if you're pooling and you say because you're pooling, you're able to test so many cases, how come you're pooling and yet have a backlog of samples?
So if, for example, I have received 100 samples today and I decide to pool and make pools of 10s, then I can do 10 samples at a time. And if out of the 10, if 5 turns out to be positive, then I need to dissolve or resolve the pool. So go back to the original samples and then test them individually. Now, so I will spend some time. If I receive 1,000 samples, then I need to make 100 pools. So even though you are pooling, again, it depends on the number of samples you receive at a time. If I receive 50 in the morning, then I'll make only 5 pools. If I receive 100, I'll make 10 pools. So the more you receive, the more pools you make, and it also translates into the amount of time or the duration you spend on the pooling. And again, if a number of them turns out to be positive, then you still need to go back, dissolve or resolve the pool, and so you start the process again. But of course, I'm sure a time will come where the pooling may not really be very important. Because if, for example, the prevalence or the number of people testing positive goes up, then you have to switch to individual testing, because it will mean that, look, if you make 100, if you make 10 pools and all of them turns out to be positive, then it means that you will spend more reagents, you spend more time. So as soon as the prevalence goes up, then you also need to change your testing strategy and go back to the individual testing of samples, or the single testing of samples. So you always have to play around. You always have to make some adjustments and so on and so forth.
So if you have backlogs, for instance, and so a case comes to you, you're testing, and let me use myself for purposes of this discussion. You test me today, and after 3 days, I am told of my status. Now, from today till Thursday or to Saturday or Sunday, I'd still be engaging with people. I could go home and infect my family because I probably wouldn't know. And so I'm not going to be engaging in self-quarantine or whatever. Doesn't that in itself defeat the very purpose of testing? Because then you don't know what you're up to.
So it is not only about testing, but again, it is also even about the behavior of the potential or the suspected cases. So if your sample has been, whether your sample has been taken or not, I think now the principle is that we all need to be in nose mask. And once you are in the nose mask, you are not only protecting yourself, but I think you're actually protecting the other person. So that if I am in a nose mask and she is also, or you are also in a nose mask, then invariably we all end up protecting ourselves. So that if your sample has been taken and you haven't yet gotten the results and you are still in a nose mask, not only in a nose mask, but you are also adhering to the physical distancing. Beyond that, you are also adhering to the hand hygiene, then chances are that you will slow down, because once I am in a nose mask, I am washing my hands, I am not, I'm adhering to social distancing or physical distancing, then you know what I'm doing? I am trying to limit the rate at which I will end up giving the virus to you. So I am limiting what we call the production number to less than 1, or to less than 1. And by so doing, it means that because I myself as an individual, I have been able to put these measures in place, then I will end up not giving or transmitting the virus to somebody else. So all these things are important. And of course, now we know that the good thing is that we have expanded our testing sites. So we have deployed, we have more testing sites. Just yesterday, our team from KCCR and a team from Noguchi, they went to Tamale and Pont Tamale. So they went to the Tamale reference, the public health reference lab, as well as Pont Tamale, and they have established the testing system over there. So I'm sure very soon the numbers we see in our labs, as well as the numbers seen in Accra, in terms of suspected cases, so samples to be tested, they will all go down. I know that very soon in the Western, they will also set up a lab. I know already in the Volta region, US has already started testing. So once we have several test sites, then we will not be facing some of these backlogs. I mean, we all want to see real-time data But I'm sure we'll get there very soon. Let's give ourselves some few days, some few weeks. Okay. I'm sure that once you are tested, you will know your test results within a day, maybe within a day, maybe not more than a day. But now we are shorthand and we are overwhelmed, and that's how come we have gone out to establish more testing sites.
Great. We'll come to the real-time data, but everything you've talked about, about people protecting themselves, people doing the right thing. Yes, you're talking about what life ought to be. This is the ideal situation, but of course we do know also that many people don't go by the ideal situation. So as much as we're talking about the need, the importance to protect ourselves, people are not doing that. And in many of the instances, people do that when they know that this is the situation. And so even if I know, for instance, that I have COVID-19, I would even take steps to protect others from getting close to me. We're a society that loves to shake hands, that loves to hug and all of that. So there is always that, situation of people doing that and probably saying, oh, don't worry, COVID-19 wouldn't do us anything. You're thinking about going to wash your hands only for you to forget and touch your face. Shouldn't we be ensuring that in real time, now coming to the question, we're able to test and get people to know their status?
I think gradually we will get there, but I also don't want to underestimate the importance of education, because look, listening to all the adverts around or surrounding COVID-19 on our airwaves, sometimes I'm like, maybe we are just giving out a lot of information, but we are really not educating the general public or our listening public. Because if you go like, oh yeah, I know this is difficult, don't touch your face, but I know it is difficult. Definitely it is so difficult, but I'm sure if you explain to our population, our listening public, why we should not touch our face, about the fact that, look, this virus, it is smart, and the only way it can get into you, your lungs, is through your mouth and through your nose. And your face, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, they are all some way, somehow connected. So you try not to touch that area of yours. I think we need to switch again in terms of re-strategizing. We may also even want to look at the way we are giving out information. Maybe we may want to go a step higher, because now our people, they know that we've got to wash our hands, but why must you even wash your hands with soap under running water? Because we need to tell them that, look, the virus has an envelope. If you are going to post a letter or mail a letter and it is in an envelope, the envelope protects the virus, or the envelope protects the letter. Now, if I wash my hands with soap and water, this envelope is such that it has lipids or fats, oil around itself. So when I use water and soap and water, then I'm able to remove this layer, this envelope. So I think we may also want to step in. Of course, getting instant results, real-time results is excellent, but we are not there yet. Now we are setting more sites, okay. But I think it also behoves on us as individuals to be taught the reasons behind, or the whys underlining all the information we have been giving out. Why must I maintain social or physical distancing? Do our people even know what 6 feet is? Do we know what 2 meters is? We don't. But I'm expecting that by now, on our screens, we will be showing people what we mean by 6 feet or 2 meters. We know that you stretch your hand, the other person stretches his or her arm, and that is already 2 meters. When we went to school, primary school, we're all doing arms forward stretch. Okay. That is 1 meter. So I think we may also, we shouldn't just put all the blame on the lab. But we should also look at education.
Okay. So talking about education, in effect, you're saying that how we go about education, certainly not the best, and currently our ways of educating people is inappropriate.
I think I did not say inappropriate. I said we have given a lot of information, but we should go a step higher or a step further and now give education. Because if I tell you, wash your hands, I am giving you information. If I say, don't touch your face, and there's this one particular advert in the local language, it goes like, minim se eyedin. So if you know it is difficult, then why don't you explain or tell me why it is so difficult, but I still need to make sure that I am not touching my face. So we have given out a lot of information. We need to be adhering to social distancing. Why? Do we want to talk about the fact that the virus is able to travel within this distance, or it is a droplet? And even as a human being, when you talk, or when you talk, sometimes you see droplets, and the chances are that the virus may be hiding in the droplet. Even when it comes to the wearing of face masks, I mean, I'm yet to see, and maybe I haven't seen it, maybe it is still there, but I'm expecting to see something on our screens showing how even face masks are worn and how they are removed. Because we know that when you are wearing these masks and when we are removing them, these are the two main areas whereby you may get yourself infected. And the fact that even before you wear the mask, you've got to practice or maintain hand hygiene, i.e. washing your hands with soap and water under running water, and of course using the hand sanitizers as well. I think we need to, even when it comes to our education, we need to re-strategize. I mean, these hot maps on the heat maps showing where the hot spots are on the Ghana Health Service, they are excellent, they are super. But why can't we even have them project? I mean, when you walk through in town, you see a lot of LCD projector screens, big screens. Why can't we project them, maybe region by region, maybe district by district, so that if I live in the Ashanti region and I assume that, oh, the lockdown has been lifted, or the restrictions on movement has been lifted, and so I can just go about my duties as if there's nothing at stake. But then as I go through, or I move from maybe Tech Campus to Edum, and I see a screen around, I don't know, KJTR or somewhere, and I see the projections, and I see the hotspots, and I realize that, look, my area, Asokwa, is already a hotspot because of the heat map there. Then chances are that I may end up advising myself. The thing is, we have all the structures to enable us do all these education, but maybe we haven't really thought through them. We may want to step further or step
by way of clarification,
and go beyond the information.
Just by way of clarification, and let me also state that, yes, for us here at Multimedia, we've been showing it on our Facebook social media pages, how people should put on the mask and how they should go. Dr. Alikem Tama included us that favor by showing us. But you've talked about one thing. I just would want to get it very clear. So you see, we have lots of information out there, but we are not educating the people. When you talk about education, just so I get you clearly, you're saying we should be explaining to people why they have to do these things. Don't just say practice social distancing, but you explain to the person why it's important to practice the physical distancing, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Absolutely. Great. Absolutely.
Great. So let's get to another issue.
Look, some people still doubt, Winston, that the virus, I mean, there's any virus in the country. Maybe I'm assuming they are waiting to see people lying all over. But I don't think we want to get to that level. And so maybe if we re-strategize our education stroke information, the way we give these things out, chances are that people would adhere to all the necessary measures we have always been recommending.
So let's look at, the lack of real-time data. How does that affect the fight?
It does, because of course, if we have backlogs, then we may not be able to do a lot of projections. And I know that already people are working assiduously. Very soon, I'm sure you will get to know some modeling, some projections being made. But like I said, now this is the data we have. And the good thing is that now there has been an expansion in terms of our test sites. So let's give ourselves, we are not there yet. We are gradually. The good thing is, look, Winston, we have tested a lot, we have traced a lot, we have isolated people, and they are being managed, and I think that is the plus for us. I'm not saying that or by saying this, I'm not assuming we should just go to bed and sleep. We should do more, and I think that gradually we day by day we end up improving on what we have been doing. But of course, real-time data should be the landmark, and that should be our main objective. And I'm sure one day we will get up and realize that, look, every blessed day the numbers will be coming up, or the number of positives in terms of the results will be displayed on the website. Maybe every day we'll see a lot of projections being made on daily basis. But we are not there yet. But I'm positive.
If we don't have real-time data, and because we don't have real-time data also, our projections cannot be up to the minute, isn't it the case that our fight is deficient then?
So even though data is very, very important in this case, this is what we have. And I don't think that we should base our argument on the fact that we don't have real-time data and do whatever we want to do, i.e. the other mitigation measures. I mean, since we know we don't have enough data or real-time, not enough data, we don't have real-time data currently, but then we can do other things to enable us limit the spread of this virus. I think the good thing would be to rather look at what we have. The nose masks, we do have them. Now the FDA has indicated the specific requirements. Like you said, on multimedia, every now and then you show how people should be wearing the nose mask. If we improve on our education bit, and I know the Ghana Health Service, the Public Health Division, they are working day and night. And I'm sure very soon we'll be able to provide all of us. We all need the data. We are researchers. We also need the data to do other interesting things like other countries are doing. It's a shortfall, but it's a shortfall now. I'm sure we will definitely jump over this hurdle very soon.
But I mean, certainly while we wait to get over it, it's also affecting fight against COVID-19. But just so we can have a better understanding also, for you at KCCR, daily, I mean, how many samples are brought for testing on the average?
Sometimes you can receive 3,000, 2,500, sometimes 1,500. So these numbers are the samples coming in. But in terms of how many we are able to test, we are able to do between 1,000 and 2,500 on daily basis. This is because we have increased our staff strength. When we started, or when this pandemic began, we were just receiving samples in tens, in hundreds. It moved into the 200s, the 500s, the thousands. So we also needed to re-strategize, bring in more hands. So now we do day, night, every time when you get into our labs, you definitely meet people testing, doing data entry, doing sample collection, and everything related to the testing of this particular virus.
So if you have on the average between 1,005 to 2,005, or let's even say 3,000, and you'd be able to do 2,500 daily, then on days that you have 1,005 samples coming in, your capacity of doing 2,005 would make up for the shortfall the previous day. So how come you have backlogs?
So like I said, it is not as if every day we end up receiving 1,000. Sometimes we can receive 2,000. Sometimes we may receive 3,000. Sometimes you receive 3,500. Sometimes it is 3,000. Just today, we had to increase our staff strength because of the numbers we have sitting, the samples we have sitting in our labs. Now we want to clear everything.
How many samples do you have sitting in your lab currently?
Maybe a little over 8,000. But we have given ourselves, yes, we have given ourselves up to Sunday. We should be able. And the good thing is that now we have also even even on KNUST campus, we have expanded our tentacles. We have set up a lab at Konfanochi. We hope that very soon it will be up and running. The interesting thing is that for this particular virus, you need a special containment to enable you work on the virus. So even for us in Noguchi, we never work with the live virus, the viable virus.
What does that mean?
Because to enable you, or if you, yes, so the live virus. If you want to grow the virus or so-called culture the virus, you need a special containment, and this containment is known as a biosafety level 4 laboratory. But what we and Noguchi have, we have a biosafety level 3. So even for us, when we receive the samples, we do something known as inactivation, because we cannot work with the live virus or with the living virus. So we have to inactivate the virus and then work on just the genetic aspect, which is the RNA of the virus, and enable us say whether the sample is positive or is negative. And these are all shortfalls. Okay. If you have only 2 facilities with biosafety level 3, then definitely it means that your testing capacity or your ability to produce results will definitely be limited. We know that Pont-Tamale, they have a biosafety level 3. The Veterinary Services Department in Accra, they have a biosafety level 3 as well. And I know that in the Western region, I think the Canadian Embassy or the Canadian government, they put up a biosafety level 3 laboratory. But then in the absence of a biosafety level 3 laboratory, you can also use a biosafety level 2. But then it means that those who are working on the samples, the suspected samples, you have to don a full PPE with face shields, with goggles, with every single thing needed. So these are all challenges, but I think we've been able to, even in the face of
what would have been the best, laboratory with biosafety levels? Is it level 4 that is the best for,
So you don't need level 4. When you watch movies, level 4, you see people working in labs. It's as if they are swimming, they are in space, and they are working. So that one is a typical biosafety level 4. You need that when you want to grow the virus. Do something with the live virus, because it's a new virus. If you have a biosafety level 3, then you may only want to inactivate the virus and rather deal with the RNA of the virus.
Okay, we'll go for a break shortly, but before we go for the break, so you have a backlog of 8,000 cases.
Close to 8,000 cases. Because today we have tested some. So chances are that, and I need to go and look at the logs. Chances are that it has gone down. But I have seen a number of cars trooping in with samples. So these are just
so these
estimates.
The close to 8,000 that you have. How many days, based on even your expanded capacity or your expanded staff, would you take to, complete the 8,000 backlog that you have? Silverkin? Okay, so we'll go for a short break. On a return, I'm sure we'll be able to work, the technology and get back to Dr. Silverkin. This is Upfront on JoyNews. I'm Winston Amwa. When we return, we're still finding out whether it's time to, re-strategize in our fight against COVID-19. We'll be right back. Back from that short break, and thank you very much for staying. This is Upfront on JoyNews. I'm Winston Amwa. We're talking about, whether it's important to begin talking or thinking about reviewing Ghana's strategy in the fight against COVID-19. We have Dr. Angelina Agustina Silverkin, who's a virologist with the KCCR, joining us via Zoom. So, Dr. Silverkin, I was asking you about, whether, how many days it was going to take you to clear the backlog that we have at KCCR, close to 8,000 of them. How long would it take you?
4 days. 4 days. Looking at the fact that we have expanded our sites, so we have one at Konfanochi, we have another one at the School of Medical Sciences and Dentistry on campus, and so if we give ourselves 4 days, we should be able to clear the backlog.
And while you spend 4 days clearing the backlog, all other cases that come must wait.
No, because the good thing is that now Tamale, the northern part of Ghana, has been taken care of yesterday. So now samples from that area of Ghana will stay up north, and we will end up receiving samples from the Ashanti region. Sometimes we receive samples from the central region, even western region. Sometimes they send us samples, and if we look at the number of samples we've tested up north, so Upper East, Upper West, Tamale, Bono East, and all the new regions. Once we have been able to set up two labs actually up. In fact, we even want to go to Navrongo and set up one, but we are still waiting. So once we set all these sites up, and even once there will be another one in the western region, I'm sure the numbers coming to us and Noguchi would also go down a little bit.
Except that, so, and I come back to this issue of, people walking about and a society that hardly practices physical distancing. Many of these persons could test positive, they might not know, and will be mingling with society, will be mingling with family members because also the trust that they might have that none of their members, has this virus. That certainly, defeats, to a certain extent, our fight and our commitment towards dealing with COVID-19.
Yes, and I think I have stressed on education. Maybe people haven't seen their family members sick and maybe even died from this particular virus. So they assume that, oh, I will never get it. But if we realize or we teach our people that every single one of us is at risk, a very high risk, then I think we'll all be very cautious. Of course, not forgetting about the issue of stigmatization, because people assume that, oh, it's only for people who traveled and got into the country. But especially now that we have a community transmission cases, then we all should be very cautious and very alert and adhere to all the necessary measures and recommendations that we have been preaching all along.
All the challenges you've explained to us, is it about time we began rethinking our strategy of dealing with COVID-19?
I think so, and I think so. We need to, and we don't only need to look in one direction, but I think we need, because fighting this particular smart virus would require, it should be a multidisciplinary approach, multifaceted, multi-pronged approach. So we need the social scientists to engage with our communities, because look, if you even need to go and take a sample from somebody, what sort of information is given to that somebody? Maybe all the person sees is, or community members, they will just realize that people in strange dresses are in their community. Maybe they may come with some security men, well-built giants. So already people will be scared. And so I think we need everybody. We need the modelers to be looking into the data. We need the virologists to understand or explain the biology of the virus. We need the medical people to be looking into the health conditions, other health conditions, and in that direction, I think we should also even be looking at the data generated within our health care system, because we know that for every district, I think every month or so, they send them their health data to, they have something known as DIMS. Yes, DIMS is the District Health Information System. I think we should be looking at that particular data, because, of course, with this virus, as soon as you begin to peak, you realize that people will not be able to sit in their homes within the communities. They will be rushing to the hospital. So if we keep an eye, or we keep our eyes on the DIMS, we'll be able to identify or realize when people begin rushing to the hospitals, because I know that I think almost every month or so, information on the DIMS is aggregated somewhere. So if we already start looking in that direction, that will be a very good strategy. And then we also know that there's a hotline, I think, is it 112 or so? And even apart from this particular hotline, there are other, is it 055s and other numbers? We may also want to be looking in the data, in the call logs. I'm sure we can easily ask the telcos to look into the data. So, for example, we can look into where a lot of calls are coming from. So if we realize that maybe Ayawasu East or somewhere is a hotspot, we may also want to look at the number of calls coming from that particular environment, and then try and focus on that particular environment. I think the president also indicated that we may be doing some more targeted, and I think that we may already start looking at, if we look at the numbers per the regions. I mean, if we look at Upper East, the Volta region, we don't know where these cases are coming from. I mean, as for Northern region, we know that now they are doing 13 positive cases. We know that 10 are from the mandatory quarantine. 3, we don't know where these 3 are from. We don't know whether they are community or also imported. Okay. So if we are able to look into every single positive case, look even at other variables, such as their ages, if they have other underlying conditions, then we may be able to re-strategize. If we realize that, look, for, let's say, OT region, these numbers, they are all beyond the age 60, and maybe they all have some underlying conditions, then we may want to keep our eyes on them. So we have to do it targetedly.
Talking about the president, talking about targeting and all of that, of course, the president said if there's a need for some targeted by a restriction of movement and all of that, that would also be looked at. Do you think we lifted our lockdown, partial lockdown, too early?
I will not say yes, I will not say no, because look, Winston, even the WHO says that you don't, whether you do lockdown, whether partially or totally, whether you do it or not, and especially when the virus is here, there will still be some cases. So it is what you do during the lockdown, whether it is total or partially, that is very, very important. So if I do a lockdown and I only sit and I don't do anything, then you end up defeating the purpose of that lockdown. So for us as a country, when we locked down, we put in a lot of measures. So we did massive or aggressive testing. We did aggressive contact tracing, and like I said, we isolated people and we treated or we managed those cases. Okay. So it is not just about locking down, because we know that some areas, and again, the WHO even indicates that for those of us in lower and middle income countries, maybe lockdowns may not be one of the best mitigation strategies, because look, some people need to get up and go to the market and sell before they can eat. So you have to look at the socio-economic dynamics of your population before you decide on whether you want to lock down or not. I mean, the best thing to do is to do a lockdown, but then as to whether you will be able to survive. And the thing is, if you even want to lock down, for how long? For 3 years, for 5 years, for 6 years, for 6 months, for 2 weeks? So you can't just get up and talk about lockdown. But then remember that lockdown is not the only strategy. We know that when you lock down, you are able to really slow the rate at which the virus moves.
So if you're able to slow the rate that the virus spreads through a lockdown, why shouldn't that be a major option in fighting the virus?
So you have to weigh. You have to weigh. Can you survive? And like I said, you want to lock down for how long? I don't think I've seen or I've heard any country whereby they have been able to lock down for 6 months or even for 3 months.
Well, the virus is not up to 6 months old, started in December. So we're yet to get to the 7th month. But some countries, I mean, the UK is still under restricted movements. And they started
before we joined. But I think they were even very late. Yes. They never tested. They wanted to achieve something known as herd immunity. So they wanted to just sit, relax, and allow the virus to come into their country for people to be infected. And then at the end of the day, they will build something known as immunity. But then look at what is happening in the UK. So I think for us, we did so very well. Just that a few people did not really adhere to the measures put in place. I mean, before the lifting up of the restrictions, I was expecting to see well-demarcated areas, especially in shopping malls, where people would stand to indicate 2 meters or 6 feet, and maybe drawings, because when you watch TV, you realize that in some countries they have clear areas where people need to stand when they want to do a checkout. Shops, markets. I mean, now we are doing very well. People are realizing that indeed the virus is here. So it's not only about lockdown. And I think the president actually indicated that, look, if people in some specific communities do not adhere to the measures, then he will even end up imposing some curfews. So I think we can't just base our arguments on lockdown without considering what we have and what we can do or will be able to do within that particular period of time.
All right, Dr. Augustina Silverken, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been a wonderful discussion. We've learned so much. We're very grateful to you. All right, so that's Dr. Augustina Silverken, who's at the KCCI and also a lecturer at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology and a virologist, joining us and helping us understand everything. Lots of issues about COVID-19. Well, she says it's important we began rethinking, our strategy in fighting COVID-19. My name is Winston Amor. Up next is JoyNews Prime. Stay and keep watching. Have a lovely evening.